Have you ever wondered about the unseen forces that shape social dynamics, giving some individuals an undeniable edge? Today, you will explore the Machiavellian Rule of the Three Gazes, a concept rooted in the subtle art of observation and psychological power. This isn't about overt dominance, but about mastering the nuanced visual cues that influence perception, potentially making others feel distinctly aware of your presence and perspective. Understanding this rule is highly relevant for anyone seeking to navigate complex social landscapes with greater awareness and subtle influence. In a world increasingly focused on overt communication, the silent language of the eyes remains a potent, often underestimated tool. By deciphering these gazes, you gain insight into how subconscious signals contribute to establishing or challenging social hierarchies and personal boundaries. Throughout this discussion, you will learn to identify and interpret three distinct types of gazes, understanding their psychological impact. We will dissect how these visual cues, when subtly employed, can shift perceptions of power and status. This framework provides a strategic lens to analyze interactions, offering tools for self-awareness and sophisticated social observation without promising manipulative outcomes. My approach to these topics draws from extensive study in behavioral psychology and historical philosophy, particularly the Machiavellian mindset, focusing on human nature and practical strategy. While these insights are powerful, they are presented with an emphasis on ethical understanding rather than manipulation. The goal is to illuminate complex human behaviors and give you a more discerning eye. To fully grasp the intricate dance of these three gazes, it's essential to first establish a foundational understanding of the principles that underpin Machiavellian thought and the nature of subtle psychological influence. Only then can you truly appreciate the depth behind these seemingly simple visual cues. The genesis of such a rule can be traced back to principles articulated by Niccolo Machiavelli, who observed that maintaining power often relies on shaping perceptions rather than sheer force. He understood that human beings are deeply influenced by what they believe to be true about others, particularly concerning strength and authority. This foundational insight into human psychology forms the bedrock of the three gazes, emphasizing calculated observation. At its core, this approach revolves around understanding psychological power, how one's demeanor and actions subtly convey command or deference. Machiavellian thought emphasizes strategic foresight and the importance of reading situations and individuals meticulously. The gazes are not merely about looking, but about an active, interpretive observation designed to gather information and project a specific kind of internal state. Different historical and psychological perspectives highlight how observation establishes social hierarchies. From ancient philosophers discussing the gaze of the ruler to modern studies on nonverbal communication, the eyes are consistently identified as primary conveyors of intention and status. This rule synthesizes these insights, translating abstract concepts into concrete, observable behaviors. Imagine a chess master studying the board. Every piece's position, every potential move is meticulously analyzed. Similarly, the three gazes ask you to approach social interactions with that same level of deliberate, analytical observation. It's about being present, discerning, and intentional with where and how you direct your visual attention, much like a strategic player assessing the game. This strategic groundwork deeply rooted in Machiavellian principles, sets the stage for dissecting each gaze individually. Understanding this philosophical context is crucial, as it transforms the simple act of looking into a potent tool for subtle influence and perception management, preparing you for the specifics of the first gaze. The first component of this powerful rule is the evaluative gaze. This is not a casual glance, but a deliberate, sustained look designed to convey an active assessment of the other person. You are not just seeing them, you are processing, analyzing, and implicitly judging their presence, their demeanor, and their contribution to the immediate environment. It's a nonverbal assertion of your own, discerning standards. When deploying the evaluative gaze, you might hold eye contact slightly longer than typical social norms suggest, allowing your eyes to slowly scan the person from head to toe, or simply maintain an unblinking focus. This communicates a sense of thoroughness and considered judgment. The objective is to make the other person subtly aware that they are being observed and internally assessed, prompting a subconscious self-evaluation on their part. Variations of this gaze include a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of the head, conveying thoughtful consideration, or a slow narrowing of the eyes as if processing complex information. These small additions amplify the impression of a deep, analytical observation. The key is subtlety. Overt staring can be aggressive, but a nuanced, evaluative look is more unsettling, sparking an internal question of what are they thinking. It is crucial to understand the limitations of the evaluative gaze. If executed poorly, it can be perceived as rude, confrontational, or simply awkward. Context is paramount. This gaze is most effective in professional or hierarchical settings where a power dynamic is already subtly at play, or where you wish to establish one. It's not for friendly banter. While the evaluative gaze establishes a deliberate act of assessment, it primarily serves to set a tone of observation. To further deepen this psychological impact and move beyond simple scrutiny, we must turn to the second gaze, which operates on a principle of subtle detachment and diminished interest. Following the evaluative gaze, the second critical component is the detached indifference. This gaze is about conveying a subtle lack of sustained interest, effectively dismissing the other person's importance after your initial comprehensive assessment. You briefly make eye contact, perhaps for only a fraction of a second. Then your gaze drifts away, almost as if you've already categorized and moved on to more significant internal thoughts or external stimuli. The goal here is to communicate that, while you acknowledge their presence, your attention is a valuable resource, not easily held. It's a subtle withdrawal of focus that can leave the other person feeling momentarily undervalued or questioning their impact. This isn't about rudeness. It's about a calculated, fleeting acknowledgement that suggests you have more pressing concerns or are simply not captivated. Examples include a quick, almost peripheral, glance that doesn't quite meet their eyes, or a gaze that sweeps past them as if they are part of the background, not the foreground. The effect is amplified if you then direct your attention to something seemingly more important or interesting, like a distant object or a thoughtful pause, reinforcing the idea of their diminished relevance. However, the detached indifference comes with significant limitations. It can easily be misinterpreted as genuine disinterest, which might not be desirable in all contexts. If overused or applied in situations demanding warmth or cooperation, it risks alienating others. This gaze is a delicate instrument, best employed when you wish to subtly shift the power dynamic by asserting your emotional control. While the detached indifference communicates a fleeting, almost dismissive judgment, it does not fully encapsulate the profound psychological impact we seek. The third gaze builds upon this foundation, introducing an element of deep, almost unsettling introspection that further enhances the Machiavellian Rule. The final and perhaps most potent component of the Machiavellian Rule of the three gazes is the penetrating insight. This gaze is a direct, unblinking and extended stare that feels as though you are looking not merely at the person, but through them, into their very thoughts or motivations. It conveys a deep, almost omniscient level of understanding, suggesting you've uncovered more than what's on the surface. This gaze often involves holding eye contact slightly longer than comfortable for the other person, but without aggression. Your expression should remain neutral, perhaps with a subtle hint of thoughtful consideration, avoiding overt judgment. The objective is to create a moment of profound introspection in the other person, making them feel as if their innermost workings are being laid bare before you, without you saying a single word. Variations include a slow, deliberate shift of your gaze from one eye to the other, or a slight widening of your pupils, if you can consciously control it, to give an impression of intense focus. The key is to project an aura of calm, yet profound mental engagement. This gaze is a powerful assertion of psychological power, suggesting you possess an understanding beyond what they might reveal. The limitations of the penetrating insight are substantial. If misused, it can be perceived as overtly aggressive, creepy, or simply staring, which breaks the illusion of profound insight. It demands considerable emotional control and a genuine sense of inner composure. This gaze is a rare, high-impact tool, not to be deployed casually, and should be coupled with a quiet, authoritative presence to be effective. Understanding each gaze individually is foundational. However, the true mastery of this Machiavellian principle emerges when you learn to strategically weave these three distinct gazes together, creating a seamless and deeply impactful sequence that enhances your psychological power and influence. The real potency of the Machiavellian Rule of the three gazes emerges not from isolated application, but from their strategic sequencing. Imagine the psychological impact of moving from an initial, careful, evaluative assessment through a brief, detached indifference, culminating in a penetrating insight. This progression creates a narrative of your thought process, making the other person feel thoroughly observed, then subtly dismissed, only to be revisited with an unnerving depth. This sequence leverages the innate human desire for validation and understanding. The initial evaluation signals importance, the detachment withdraws it, and the final penetration reestablishes a powerful, albeit unsettling, connection. This deliberate ebb and flow of attention plays on subconscious fears of judgment and the need to be fully seen, compelling the other person to reflect on their own presence. It's a display of refined psychological power. The Machiavellian mindset here is about calculated observation and the strategic deployment of attention. You are not just reacting, you are orchestrating a subtle ballet of visual cues to achieve a specific psychological outcome. This approach is about influencing perception without overt demands, allowing the other person to draw their own conclusions about your discerning nature and self-possession. Deciding when to use which gaze and in what order depends entirely on the context and your objective. Are you aiming to assert authority in a negotiation or subtly command respect in a group setting? The sequence can be adapted, sometimes starting with detachment before a deeper gaze can be equally powerful. The key is intentionality and a deep understanding of the moment. Beyond the specific sequence of gazes, their effectiveness is greatly amplified when combined with other subtle nonverbal cues. These external manifestations of your internal state significantly contribute to the overall impression, shaping how your gazes are received and interpreted. While the three gazes are powerful in themselves, their impact is profoundly amplified when integrated with other subtle nonverbal cues. Your posture, facial expressions, and even the strategic use of silence create a congruent message, reinforcing the psychological power of your gaze. A composed, upright posture, for instance, naturally enhances the authority conveyed by a penetrating insight, making it more impactful. Maintaining impeccable emotional control is paramount when deploying these gazes. A stoic, unreadable facial expression ensures that your internal thoughts are not easily deciphered, adding to the mystery and gravitas of your visual communication. Any sign of nervousness, discomfort, or overt emotion will undermine the calculated effect of the gazes, revealing vulnerability rather than projecting subtle influence. The power lies in subtlety. Overly dramatic gestures or theatrical expressions will immediately break the illusion, making your actions appear performative and disingenuous. The most effective nonverbal cues are those that are barely perceptible, yet resonate deeply on a subconscious level. A slow, deliberate movement, a slight nod, or a calm, steady breath can all serve to emphasize your gaze without drawing overt attention to themselves. Consider the strategic use of silence. When you employ a penetrating insight, holding that gaze in a moment of silence can create immense psychological pressure. It forces the other person to fill the void, often revealing their discomfort or eagerness to please. This combination of a powerful gaze and a lack of verbal response can be far more commanding than any spoken word. These external nonverbal cues are undeniably potent, yet they are merely reflections of a deeper internal game. True mastery of the Machiavellian Rule of the three gazes requires cultivating an unwavering inner state, a psychological fortitude that underpins every look and every gesture you make. The external application of the three gazes is merely the tip of the iceberg. Their true power emanates from an unwavering internal state. To execute these gazes effectively, you must cultivate profound psychological power, rooted in self-mastery and emotional control. This involves training your mind to remain calm, focused, and impenetrable, regardless of external circumstances or the reactions you observe. Principles of Stoicism are incredibly valuable here. Stoicism teaches the importance of distinguishing between what you can control, your thoughts, reactions, and internal state, and what you cannot, external events, other people's opinions. By embracing Stoic philosophy, you develop the resilience to maintain an unreadable demeanor, ensuring that your gaze projects strength and composure rather than insecurity or over-eagerness. Developing inner psychological power requires consistent self-discipline and mental resilience. This means practicing mindfulness, cultivating self-awareness, and rigorously challenging your own emotional responses. The aim is to achieve a state where your internal landscape is stable and unaffected by the momentary fluctuations of social interaction, allowing your gazes to be truly deliberate and impactful. The effectiveness of the detached indifference, for example, comes from genuine indifference, not feigned aloofness. If you are genuinely unconcerned with external validation, your brief glance and subsequent turning away will carry an authentic weight that is difficult to ignore. This authenticity is critical. Any pretense is often subconsciously detected, diminishing the desired psychological impact. Cultivating this profound inner strength is not just about projecting authority, it is about genuinely inhabiting it. This internal work is the wellspring from which the perception of hierarchy naturally flows, making your subtle actions far more impactful in shaping social dynamics. The ultimate aim of the Machiavellian Rule of the Three Gazes is to subtly contribute to establishing a perceived hierarchy in social interactions. This doesn't mean becoming overtly aggressive or demanding. Instead, it's about employing visual cues that subconsciously position you as an individual of high discernment, strategic thought, and unwavering emotional control. The gazes create a subtle feeling of inferiority in the other person by prompting self-questioning. When effectively deployed, these gazes convey that your assessment carries weight, your attention is a privilege, and your understanding runs deep. This subtle communication taps into innate human instincts regarding social standing. People subconsciously respond to perceived authority and tend to defer to those who project an air of calm, observant command, often without being fully aware of why they feel this way. In the intricate dance of social dynamics and power plays, the deliberate use of eye contact is a foundational element. A consistent, calm, and purposeful gaze can signal confidence and an unwillingness to be easily swayed. Conversely, darting eyes or an inability to maintain eye contact can inadvertently communicate nervousness or subservience, thus reinforcing or challenging existing hierarchies. The feeling of inferiority evoked by these gazes is not about diminishing the other person's inherent worth, but about shifting their internal perception of their standing relative to yours in that specific interaction. It encourages them to subconsciously adjust their approach, perhaps speaking with more deference or seeking your approval. This is the essence of subtle psychological power at play. This nuanced understanding of creating perceived hierarchy without overt manipulation brings us closer to the core principles of dark psychology. These concepts illuminate how even seemingly benign actions, like a gaze, can have profound effects on human perception and behavior, necessitating a careful ethical examination. Connecting the Machiavellian Rule of the Three Gazes to principles of dark psychology reveals how subtle, nonverbal cues can deeply influence human behavior and perception. Dark psychology explores the tactics used to subtly manipulate others, often by preying on subconscious vulnerabilities. The gazes, while not inherently malicious, operate in this realm by triggering inherent insecurities and prompting self-doubt through strategic attention and detachment. By using the evaluative gaze, you activate the human desire for approval and the fear of judgment. The detached indifference taps into the fear of insignificance, making the other person question their importance. The penetrating insight can evoke a sense of being seen through, potentially exposing hidden intentions or vulnerabilities. This combination, even when subtly applied, can trigger deep-seated psychological responses. The ethical tightrope here is thin. Understanding these tools for awareness, to protect yourself from similar tactics, or to navigate social situations with greater acumen, is one thing. Employing them with the explicit intent to exploit vulnerabilities or cause undue distress is another. The knowledge of how these dynamics work is a form of psychological power, and its application demands profound self-awareness and integrity. Human beings are often more susceptible to subtle cues than overt commands. When someone perceives authority or inferiority through nonverbal means, it can feel more real because it bypasses conscious defenses. This makes the three gazes a potent, though quiet, instrument in the broader landscape of social influence, highlighting the importance of emotional control in both receiving and delivering these signals. While dark psychology illuminates the potential for influence, it also imposes a critical responsibility. Recognizing these dynamics compels us to consider the ethical implications of wielding such psychological power, and to clearly delineate when and how these insights should and should not be applied in our interactions. The power inherent in the Machiavellian Rule of the three gazes necessitates a serious discussion of ethical responsibility. This information is provided to enhance your understanding of human behavior and social dynamics, not to equip you with tools for malicious manipulation. True mastery involves self-awareness and the ability to navigate interactions skillfully, without resorting to tactics that cause harm or disrespect. This exploration of psychological power is for informational and educational purposes only. It is intended to help you understand subtle influences in social interactions and to develop your own emotional control. It should not be used to intentionally cause distress, diminish others, or engage in unethical manipulation. Respect for individual autonomy and well-being must always be paramount. There are numerous situations where these gazes are entirely inappropriate. In casual conversations with friends, when building genuine rapport, or in any context requiring authentic connection and empathy, deploying these calculated gazes would be counterproductive and damaging. They are tools for strategic understanding, not for fostering warm, trusting relationships. Misusing these techniques carries significant negative repercussions. You risk being perceived as arrogant, emotionally distant, or even aggressive, which can lead to social isolation, damaged relationships, and a reputation for insincerity. The subtle art of influence is built on nuance. Heavy-handed application will only lead to unfavorable outcomes, undermining any perceived psychological power. Recognizing these crucial ethical boundaries is essential for true growth. It helps us understand that while influencing perceptions can be a form of power, the greatest power often lies in self-mastery and the ability to control one's own responses, rather than attempting to control others. Beyond using the three gazes to understand others, a profound application lies in turning these insights inward. By understanding how subtle visual cues impact perception, you can build your own resilience and develop an unflappable demeanor, enhancing your emotional control. You become less susceptible to others attempting similar psychological tactics, recognizing their intent and choosing your response consciously. Embracing a Machiavellian mindset in this context means adopting a strategic approach to your own psychological defenses. You learn to observe your own reactions, identify triggers, and consciously choose how to project yourself. This isn't about being cold, but about cultivating a strong inner core that is not easily disturbed by external judgments or attempts at subtle influence from others. Developing this internal strength involves consistently practicing emotional control. When someone attempts an evaluative gaze on you, instead of feeling judged, you can consciously acknowledge it, maintain your composure, and respond with a calm, steady presence. This self-mastery transforms potential vulnerabilities into opportunities to demonstrate your own psychological power. The practice of observational skills without judgment extends to self-observation. Regularly reflect on your own nonverbal communication, your habitual gazes, and how you might be inadvertently projecting unintended messages. This heightened self-awareness is a cornerstone of Stoicism, allowing you to refine your presence and ensure your external demeanor aligns with your internal intentions. This journey of becoming unflappable is crucial, but it also necessitates an understanding of how to read the room and adapt your strategies. Recognizing the unique dynamics of each social situation allows you to deploy your cultivated psychological power with intelligence and precision. A critical aspect of truly mastering the Machiavellian rule of the three gazes is the ability to read others and adapt your approach accordingly. You must develop a keen sense for discerning if someone is consciously or unconsciously employing similar psychological tactics on you. This awareness allows you to choose an effective counter-response rather than simply reacting to their subtle influence. By understanding the nuanced language of the eyes, you can better interpret intentions. Is someone using an evaluative gaze to gauge your confidence, or a detached indifference to dismiss your input? Your adaptation might involve mirroring their composure, escalating your own penetrating gaze, or consciously breaking the pattern to re-establish a more balanced interaction. Flexibility is key. The social context dictates everything. Deploying a penetrating insight might be appropriate during a high-stakes negotiation where asserting psychological power is vital. However, in a collaborative team meeting, a more open and inclusive gaze would foster better teamwork. Your ability to adjust your visual communication based on the environment and your objective demonstrates true strategic intelligence. Learning to differentiate between genuine interest and a calculated gaze requires practice and intuition. Some people naturally hold strong eye contact. Others might be attempting to project an image. Your task is to observe, analyze the entire nonverbal cluster, and make an informed judgment rather than jumping to conclusions based on a single cue. This ability to read, adapt, and strategically respond leads directly to the practical application of this powerful knowledge. Translating theoretical understanding into tangible skills requires deliberate practice and thoughtful implementation within your daily interactions. To effectively implement the Machiavellian rule of the three gazes, begin with deliberate, conscious practice. Start by isolating each gaze. Practice the evaluative gaze by observing inanimate objects or people from a distance, focusing on sustaining a thoughtful, analytical look. Then, try the detached indifference, briefly glancing and then calmly redirecting your attention, noting your internal shift. Next, practice the penetrating insight by holding steady eye contact with a mirror, maintaining a neutral yet deeply observant expression. This builds your emotional control and comfort with intense eye contact. Gradually, introduce these individual gazes into low-stakes social interactions, observing responses without judgment, much like a scientist conducting a controlled experiment on human behavior. If you're finding this deep dive into psychological power fascinating, ensure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. We explore these profound topics weekly, offering unique perspectives on mastering the intricate dynamics of human interaction. Your continued engagement helps us uncover more of these hidden truths. Journaling your observations is a powerful tool for refinement. After each practice session, note what you did, the reaction you perceived, and how you felt internally. This self-reflection helps you refine your timing, intensity, and overall presence, ensuring your application of the gazes becomes increasingly natural and impactful. Aligning with a sophisticated Machiavellian now, integrating the rule of 3 gazes into your daily interactions requires deliberate practice and a heightened sense of awareness. You begin by observing, understanding the other person's baseline emotional state, and then subtly introducing the first gaze to establish your presence. The second gaze builds curiosity and a slight unease, while the third, decisive gaze, delivers the intended psychological impact. It's about precision, not aggression, fostering a subtle shift in their internal perception through your deliberate nonverbal cues, a true display of psychological power. To further refine your understanding of these intricate dynamics, explore classical texts on rhetoric and human behavior, alongside modern studies in nonverbal communication. Delve into the works of Machiavelli himself, not just for his political theories, but for the profound insights into human nature he offers. Understanding the historical context of strategic thinking enhances your grasp of how these principles translate into contemporary interactions, reinforcing a robust Machiavellian mindset for discerning power plays. Understand that mastery of the 3 gazes, or any form of subtle psychological influence, is not an overnight transformation. Results will vary based on individual contexts and your consistent application. You are not seeking instantaneous control, but rather cultivating a refined ability to subtly shape perceptions over time. Expect initial awkwardness, learn from each interaction, and remain resilient in your practice. This is a journey of developing profound emotional control and a strategic understanding of human psychology. If you found this exploration into the Machiavellian rule of the 3 gazes thought-provoking and wish to delve deeper into the nuances of dark psychology and stoicism for self-mastery, consider subscribing. Your engagement fuels further research into these often unseen aspects of human interaction and psychological power. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you perceive the ethical boundaries of such influence? Ultimately, understanding the Machiavellian rule of the 3 gazes arms you with knowledge. It equips you not necessarily to dominate, but to discern, protect your own psychological space, and navigate complex social landscapes with greater strategic awareness. This journey into profound psychological power is about cultivating an informed perspective, allowing you to recognize these subtle forms of influence, whether you choose to employ them responsibly or simply defend against them.